Hiya friends, Happy New Year! Well, this was supposed to come out right after New Year's anyway, but the death of my dear 5-year laptop postponed it. Rest well, old friend. This is something very different from the usual. In celebration of having completed 99 challenges now, as I work on my 100th challenge, I want to look back on all the challenges I've completed. Not only look back, but rank them based on how enjoyable and worthwhile of a challenge they are to do, based on my personal experience. Lower to 1, the more I dislike the challenge experience, and the closer to 10, the better. Obviously, what I ended up liking or disliking doesn't mean you'd feel the same way, especially since I may like the actual game I'm playing more or less than you would, but here's a chance to share my thoughts on the journey so far. So it's clear, DLC aren't considered separate challenges to me any more than doing more of a game and 100%ing it is. It's all the same challenge, just more of the game. Sometimes I do everything in the game in one video. Sometimes I split it up or only do the story. Still, all one challenge. So it's at least touched on. My anti-challenge for April Fools is definitely not a challenge, ergo the name, anti-challenge. That's how I count and consider everything anyway. I'll try to minimize major spoilers in case you haven't played a game in here, but tread cautiously as spoilers might still abound in the footage. Now let's get to the ranking. Star Wars Battlefront 2's Galactic Conquest No Dying as a Sniper, my very first challenge. Nearly 4 years ago. Gah! I'm ancient! This challenge so easily makes that transition from alive and crushing it to oops, I'm dead. My ally NPCs were mostly awful, and the enemy was very random in how skilled each was. It really pushed me to make every shot count, which I do appreciate, and play as though my real life was at stake. But the major luck factor hurts this challenge, bringing it to a 6 on the scale. Past me told only of the winning run in this video, not the many losses. I presume to save time, but that's not a mistake I'd make again. LEGO Star Wars Complete Saga No Dying, the other big game alongside Star Wars Battlefront responsible for my love of Star Wars as a little rat. This was before I tried to beat the LEGO games without dying even once. I just had to beat each level without dying, but not reset the whole game. That made it less frustrating, and with those ship chase sections being so difficult to avoid death by collision or turrets, it's probably a wise choice. A neat way to raise the stakes of what is already a plenty fun game. I'll give it a 7. Tiny Tina's Wonderland's No Guns was my first adventure in the Borderlands games, and my last. Not because I disliked it, I just never got around to another. I hadn't yet figured out how to structure my videos, and this one probably focused too much on story over the challenge aspect, but I really did enjoy playing to the fantasy element with only my melee and magic. I don't remember it being particularly hard, just a fun, silly adventure. We'll go with 6. Splinter Cell Conviction Deadshot Challenge. It's hard to go back and listen to my early challenges as I was so new and inexperienced that I hadn't realized how bad my audio quality was. The price of growth is cringing at your past self, I suppose. This challenge really speaks to my inexperience as I also didn't clearly define hard enough rules. I allowed melee and auto-targeting when I never should have for an accuracy-based challenge. That's why I went on to beat the game with only guns, and then without guns to fix that issue. Only problem? It's been over a year since I've done that follow-up challenge, and I still haven't made the related video. Whoops! The Deadshot challenge is far too easy and not nearly engaging enough, bringing this one down to our first 3. The LEGO Skywalker Saga No Dying Challenge. This was my second LEGO challenge and the last to follow the rule of being no dying per level as opposed to no dying at all. My best friend and I played almost every single LEGO game by TT Games together, and we were so extremely hyped for this one, as I'm sure many others were. Only to be one of the biggest disappointments LEGO game-wise. For how big it is, it's so empty and lacking in terms of engaging gameplay, interesting puzzles, or good co-op. It just feels like I'm watching the movies, but not in a fun way. It still disappoints me, and while this challenge helped a tiny bit to make it more interesting, it doesn't fix that this game lacks the joy that its predecessors had. I'm gonna have to give it a 3, though I am always thankful it's the videos that first got me any attention, bringing me from 40 subscribers to over 1,000. Assassin's Creed 2 No Desynchronizations is my second full game reset challenge, and a much easier one. The very first Assassin's Creed game I had ever played, I've probably played through this one 6 or 7 times total, as I always had a soft spot for it. That made it a lot easier than I expected to beat it without failure, minus one insane glitch. Mechanically, the older AC games were always more about the experience than actually being difficult, with its very fun but straightforward combat. That's why I didn't just do no death, but had to raise the stakes with no desyncing at all, and that ensured the tension was heightened enough to land this a 7. LEGO Batman No Dying. As I've established, the LEGO games were my heart and soul growing up, and as a little rat who longed for every Batman thing possible, this was a perfect game. Lots of nostalgia games I'm realizing in these early challenges. It's not a particularly difficult game, as most enemies are melee fighters that could be sent flying with a single punch, but it is the very first LEGO challenge I had to beat without dying once. It's nice of me, to start with one I'm so well versed in. It worked out pretty well and convinced me to continue with other LEGO games, which usually went much worse. I'd say it deserves a spot right next to the complete saga, as it may not be challenging per level, but its fun factor is equal in getting to play both sides of the law and the threat of full game reset. Dishonored without stealth was my first playthrough of Dishonored, and so I chose a challenge that I thought went against everything you're supposed to do in a stealth-focused game. It's a solid experience, it's a good game, and it's a fun way to play that grew better the further I got. It gets a 6. Enough said. Jedi Fallen Order No Damage Challenge. I assume if you're watching this, you probably know how much I've played the Jedi games by now. As my first challenge for the first game, I'm both mortified at how bad I was doing and happy at how far I've come. It's so fun to see in action that failure really is the greatest teacher, as all these losses have made me way better at the game. My first challenge in the Jedi series, I think, deserves a 7. For my skill level at the time, it was perfectly challenging. It goes to show, what is challenging for one person is incredibly easy for another, and it's extremely satisfying when those two people in comparison are just different versions of yourself. My 10th challenge came to me at the recommendation of a friend to try out this game I kept meaning to get around to, but never found the time for, Ghost of Tsushima. What a great choice, as it quickly became a favorite. I kept it simple for my first playthrough. Sword only, not any of the many weapons Jen normally has access to, and that was enough to make it both challenging and worthwhile. True love was found in lethal difficulty, the perfect balance of consequences for both me and my foes. That earns it the first 8. LEGO called again, and I had to answer. This time with LEGO Marvel Superheroes No Dying. Having the Fantastic Four and the X-Men in it already gives this one such a major win. The level of challenge in the LEGO verse really differs game to game, but this is another where I didn't have much to worry about despite its combat focus, as every enemy dropped much needed health to keep me in the game. All the comic love was slightly more fun than the previous LEGO runs, putting this as the second 8. Uncharted is that series I didn't grow up with, but once I played, I felt like I had grown up with it. You know what I mean? It's truly a spectacular series, and one I wanted to try something different with. This is why I chose to do a headshot-only challenge and really push my accuracy skills while keeping track through the in-game stats. I'm no ace marksman, so this one really tested me, especially with certain chase scenes. Still, it feels so good to pull off back-to-back headshots, and the game itself is so strong that it earns a 7. LEGO Indiana Jones No Dying is definitely the hardest LEGO challenge I had faced at that point. Indiana is the melee fighter against so many gun-wielding thugs, and only through using ranged means of my own, like throwing items and my whip, can I even the odds, just for a trap to kill me. If you want to really understand how easy it is to die as Indiana Jones, this challenge teaches you. No dying challenges are great for increasing the stakes, but agonizing for most losses just being a momentary oopsie that cost everything. It can make the losses somewhat aggravating. Indiana's trap-filled challenge earns a 6. Revenge of the Sith movie game with only using the Force, which I just now realized after all this time, my thumbnail says the complete opposite. Genius! Well, it's definitely with only the Force, as lightsaber only would have been much easier. Anakin and Obi have a lot going for them Force-wise in this game, making it pretty doable, while still difficult. And while many movie games might not shine, this one holds up pretty well. A 7 for sure. Marvel's Spider-Man 2018 No Damage at All challenge is my only challenge, as of the making of this video, that I've done without taking damage even once. I didn't track my times back then, so I can only estimate, but I feel confident that I spent over 100 hours, if not 200, on this challenge alone. And I still did not succeed the right way, having to alter the rules to doing it on New Game Plus, as the gunfire proved exceptionally irksome to avoid and often would hit me even when it made zero sense. Still, I never grew tired of the game, which says a lot. And if I'm going to be stuck in a hell of my own making, might as well be one where I really love the combat, the characters, and the story. That earns it a 10 in my book. That's why, along with it being the one that was voted for on my Patreon, my 100th challenge is my return to this challenge to finally beat it right. Without the value of New Game Plus, and without turning 100 to 200 hours of work into a 15-minute rushed video with less than great audio quality, I gotta see just how far I've climbed after 3 years of YouTubing since this video. How much of Gotham Knights Can You Beat with Stealth was a chance to really live the Tim Drake strategist stealth role I always dreamed of. Cassandra Cain, Tim Drake, and Dick Grayson are in a constant battle for placement as my favorite Bat Family member. Sadly, Cass isn't a playable option. The only problem with this challenge is I played it on hard, and with how underleveled, undergeared, and unused to the combat of this game I was with all my stealthing, it really proved irritating since it had so many forced combat moments. This was one challenge I didn't much enjoy with how tedious the fighting proved to be. Maybe another run with my more experience would make it better, but for this version, that brings it down to a very low 2. God of War 2018 Fist Only was my first God of War playthrough, and despite being a war of attrition, it's all around pretty enjoyable. Not actually tedious, despite how long each fight took. Tedium isn't a problem when my heart is always racing, as the combat was quite challenging and it took minimal mistakes to drop me. Honestly, the only real problem I remember is not related to the gameplay, but being the worst audio quality of any of my videos. It's a nightmare for me after all the work I went through for it, but at least that's when I finally fixed the issue from then on. Challenge-wise, this was a good 8, and I'm looking to return to up the stakes and try again someday with a much better sounding recording next time. Just as an aside, for those who are looking to get into content creation, or really anything new, I always recommend planning it out first with proper research. But if planning means you'll keep procrastinating, then mayhaps it's better to dive in like I did and figure it all out as you go. Willingness to adapt, rolling with the punches, and listening always makes a big difference in things working out, regardless of what it is. LEGO Clone Wars No Dying killed me plenty, but not as bad as Indiana Jones did, despite this being a war, being I normally have a lightsaber. I honestly forgot this entire playthrough, and I had to re-watch my video to remember, so for being a bit forgettable, I'm gonna have to give this one a 5. The Arkham One Life Challenge. It may be 4 videos covering 4 games, but it's still only one challenge. And what a challenge it proved to be. I love the Arkham games. They remain supreme as my favorite game series, and they're how I spent most of my teens. In fact, years and years before I became a challenge gamer, they were the first games I strived to beat without taking damage even a single time. I never did succeed, because I'm terribly good at making silly blunders in a single moment of autopilot. I will get back to that though. Still, all this practice is why I was so surprised at how much I struggled to beat the games without dying altogether. This challenge pushed me beyond my limits and then usually killed me unexpectedly, losing so many hours of progress. But I loved every moment of it. Well, most moments anyway. I never could account for how easily I'd be spotted in Arkham Asylum. This challenge made me feel the danger of Batman's world better than any, and I have to give it a 10 as I really did love doing this one. I highly recommend trying it if you're a big Arkham fan. LEGO Batman 2 No Dying. I believe other than my failed LEGO run you'll see later, no LEGO challenge has claimed as many lives as this one did. Despite gaining access to an invulnerable hero like Superman, that does little when I'm being smote by God, falling so many times into the worst acid pit of all time, and constantly losing a level from the end. I do not mind losing usually. It's part of the journey after all, but I do mind losing to that one acid pit over and over, So that puts this LEGO adventure at 5. My Last of Us No Damage playthrough was another first time playthrough. Melee zombies aren't nearly the threat that gun-wielding raiders are, because of course, and avoiding gunfire isn't a talent of mine. When any wound possibly means death in a post-apocalyptic world, this challenge does a good job at simulating that, but maybe not the best challenge to play for a very first attempt. I'll still give it a 6 though, as I enjoyed it regardless of the many bullet wounds. Star Wars Bounty Hunter Without Blasters was chosen because I really liked this game when I was like 7 or 8, but I never got to finish it when I was that little. I like the idea of the game more than any challenge I do for it though, as the combat isn't nearly as enjoyable as I think it's always gonna be. The flamethrower was extremely useful, but whenever it wasn't, it was a massive slog with very little variety to it. Even though I'd go back for an opposite challenge a year later, I think this is one of those rare challenges I didn't really enjoy even close to as much as I had hoped, and I must give it a 2. LEGO Harry Potter's years 1 through 4 No Dying came at the request of a friend, and because I have very fond memories of sitting at the starting menu while my cat swatted at the broomstick flyers whizzing by. Unlike most LEGO games, it has very little focus on combat and much more focus on puzzles, meaning that it's by far one of the easiest to beat without dying. Being more puzzle focused than combat makes repeat attempts far less interesting than the other LEGO challenges, and why this one only gets a 4. I'm still wishing for a Scooby-Doo LEGO game, or Scooby-Doo Dead by Daylight. Just more Scooby-Doo things in general. For my second Jedi Fallen Order challenge, I did a collab with fellow YouTuber Red Panda Bear 39, as we competed to see who could do better beating Fallen Order without skill points or healing. It's funny once again to see how absolutely terrible I was at the game, with hundreds of losses. After all, I recently went back into Fallen Order with a very similar, but slightly harder challenge, and I came out with only 52 defeats. As for then, it pushed my skills and was fun to compete against another, deserving a placement of 7. Force Unleashed without the lightsaber. Fitting to its title, the Force Unleashed has many strong force attacks, yet also has some real roadblocks that make me yearn for my saber. I'm faced with plenty I have a good chance against, and plenty I'm heavily at a disadvantage against. The perfect balance for a great challenge, earning this entry an 8. It would be even higher, but I need the challenge to really stick with me mentally to earn that distinction. Following up Force Unleashed 1 with 2, but switching the challenge around and now taking away the Force from me, let me tell you, bad idea. While I thoroughly enjoyed fighting as Admiral Akbar, the fish hero of the stars, these games are called Force Unleashed for a reason, as using the saber only is awful. Whatever balance the first game enjoyed is thrown out the window, as I'm severely outmatched in nearly every single battle, as I very slowly whittle away at the enemies. The only saving grace is how short the game is. Usually, that can be a negative, but when the challenge makes the game worse, not better, that's a clear positive. That keeps this challenge from being worse than a 4, but a 4 it must still be. One of my rarer 100% runs, Spider-Man Miles Morales without dying or healing, proved much more trouble than I had originally anticipated. I hadn't played it before, assuming it would be about as hard as its predecessor, and so was unprepared at how much stronger most henchmen and the final boss proved to be. Thankfully, Miles is plenty powerful too. This challenge forced me to use his invisibility and venom powers much more than I probably would normally, making me take advantage of everything I could. Needing to 100% really tested me, as I had to try again and again for optional objectives, sometimes costing me the challenge. I came way too close to giving up, but resisted as Spidey would. It helps that I failed the very last challenge I had done before this, and I didn't want 2 failures in a row. Combine that with a very strong game full of heart, the cool snowy environment of Marvel New York, and it not being a terribly long game, earned this challenge a 10. Jedi Survivor Defense Mastery is actually my second Jedi Survivor challenge, but the first on this list. I failed the first one, but came back dedicated to improving for the second. I wanted to do a challenge that would force me to focus on prioritizing practice over performance. It's why I chose to do a challenge where I could only attack if I had first broken the enemy's block through parrying or by perfect dodging. It certainly put my abilities to the test and greatly improved them as well. Any challenge that focuses on working against my rushing nature and prioritizes practice is automatically a big winner in my book, which is why this challenge gets a 10. Dishonored 2 followed the path of the first by removing stealth, but I wanted to up the challenge by also taking away my ability to kill anyone. That was the perfect ingredient missing from the first one and made this challenge quite a fun one. Building the perfect non-lethal build from bone charms, sleep darts, domino powers, electric mines, and face bashing really made me feel very powerful, but also clever in beating my foes without resorting to stealth or murder. I've never played Dishonored 2 before or after this challenge, but to inexperienced me at least, this is the perfect way to play it and why this one earns a 9. Despite being 2 years since my LEGO Marvel Superheroes 2 adventure, this one feels like it was only a few months ago. This LEGO game has the distinction of being the only one I couldn't find a way to beat without dying. Korvac, the second to last level boss, proved near impossible to overcome safely. I know it is technically possible, but only with heaps of luck thrown in after hours of playing to even get to the fight. Nothing like the hardest LEGO adventure belonging to my favorite LEGO game. In LEGO games, death isn't supposed to mean much, which means it very much expects you to die, so by taking that luxury away, these games can go from comfort gaming to horror games. The saving grace is all stories can be completed pretty quickly, especially when you skip the cutscenes. The open world of this one is much more enjoyable than the actual campaign levels, plus with the worst LEGO boss fight ever of Korvac, I'll have to give this one a 5. It would be worse, but I really do like the variety of characters and environments. Assassin's Creed Origins Bow Only placed me in my favorite Assassin's Creed game with the mindset of a Skyrim player as I used stealth and bow to take out all my enemies. There were a lot of forced exceptions to this run, but I did quite enjoy testing my aim. I wish the enemies wouldn't have so much health though. The tedium of too many fights lowers the score, but that's more of a critique of the gear/leveling system than the challenge itself, as Bow Only is always a fun way to play, earning this one a 7. It would be a 6, but Bayek having 4 different types of bows to fight with is a great mechanic. Unlike Star Wars Bounty Hunter, Republic Commando holds up far better in my opinion, and so the no guns run I did was pretty fun, despite being down so often. Relying on my allies while I try to knife anyone I could reach, it really upped the difficulty of the fights and made me think much more carefully on the orders I gave my men. Plus, it's just fun to stab everyone. In game. I feel like that needs to be said. Some enemies, like the Geonosian Beam Troopers, really suck to fight though. A shining example of a 7. Sekiro No Healing was my first venture into the game and I haven't been back since. Not even because I didn't enjoy it. I really did, despite over 1,000 losses. I missed the game and I need to get back in there, but boy was it difficult. Without healing, I had to get better than good or suffer death. I often chose the death option. But other than all the evil purple villains giving me massive headaches, I enjoyed every step of the journey and really felt like I had grown immensely in skill by the end, which is easy to do when you start at the very bottom. I feel like this one deserves to be a 9, despite the simplicity of the challenge. One of my most well-known challenges and the longest challenge I've ever done, 100%ing Ghost of Tsushima without dying, was quite the adventure. 245 hours and only 50 deaths says it all. The biggest thing to take from this one is maybe I should have beaten other challenges in the game first, then done this one after gaining all that experience, but I chose to do that in reverse. This took a lot of patience and there was a big moment where I almost gave up, but still, I did enjoy every second of the challenge. It's all so beautiful and the combat feels so rewarding. I knew there were way smarter ways for me to fight and win the challenge far easier, but I wanted to win while testing my combat skills as much as I could, and I really do feel I earned it. The unskippable cutscenes did suck, but they were easily remedied by watching shows, doing chores, and exercising while I waited for them to end. This one is a clear 10 out of 10 challenge, and I'd happily do it again. I have to follow that long challenge up with one of my shortest. LEGO Force Awakens No Dying. It's also the easiest of any of the LEGO games, with double the health than normal, very simple cover combat, and the most powerful character of BB-8, bulldozing everyone. It has a whole level where there's 0 chance of death. It is not a strong enough game to earn more than a 4, with all that said. Honestly, my Jedi Survivor no blocking blaster stance only challenge barely counts as a challenge looking back. I definitely underestimated how powerful the blaster stance is, so it probably would have been better to make it the one stance I wasn't allowed. But I wanted a challenge that was the opposite of my defense challenge by being full of aggression, and it certainly succeeded at being that. Cal really shines in combat when he's fully aggressive, more than when he's defensive, and it's certainly a powerful way to play, not letting the enemy do much. It's not very challenging, but it's still a good time, making this one a 6. Gotham Knights No Dying proved to be an interesting one. I had first found the game to just be alright and too grindy, but by taking away my ability to die, yet allow myself to fight however I choose with the entire Bat family available to me, I actually came to quite enjoy the game. Even as I 100%ed as much of it as I could and dealt with the evilest death trap known to Rat or Bat, this was one I had a pretty good time doing. This challenge definitely took an alright game and boosted it to be far more fun for me. For that, it deserves an 8. Far better than my first challenge for Gotham Knights. Returning to Spidey 2018 without gadgets, healing, or upgrading so I'm the most bare-bones Spider-Man in the multiverse is not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Turns out, having super strength and agility is more than enough to handle the problems thrown Peter's way, making this one a breeze. Still was a fun time with many shenanigans, so this one deserves a 7. Star Wars Battlefront 2 2005 with only explosives was such a silly one. Blowing up the enemy as much as I blow up myself made me laugh a lot. All except that final mission of Hoth. That was terrible. Took longer than the rest of the game combined. So for the majority of the game, I'd recommend the challenge as a silly fun way to play. For the final mission of the campaign, you may want to lock in and give your all because those rebels really hate to lose, no matter how canon it's supposed to be. This challenge gets a 5. If Hoth wasn't so hellish, it'd be at a 7, but Hoth and the luck factor are just too terrible. Lies of P without healing went much like Shadows Die Twice, with oh so many deaths. I'm not the most skilled at these types of games, but I sure do like testing myself. I must give this one an 8. It's only a little worse than Sekiro because the boss fights could be a lot more punishing, and I didn't feel like I was getting much better by the end. That's more because I could use throwables to win, instead of forcing myself to get as good as needed. Injustice One Move Challenge came about simply because I spent way too many hours playing this game to not ever do a challenge for it. DC is the only universe that I might enjoy even more than the Star Wars universe. Everyone knows about that one player that loves to spam the really annoying move on repeat, so the other player can never do anything, but the low sweep isn't quite that good. Still, it must be infuriating for my enemies. A very silly challenge that I just had to try, but I would not recommend it at all with how much you need luck on your side. Or in my case, the enemy getting really dumb about defending. That makes this one a 2. 100%ing 2018 Spider-Man without dying or healing might seem simple for someone who managed to beat the main campaign without taking any damage. But remember, that required New Game Plus, took me oh so long, I was out of practice by now, and it was only for the campaign. Taskmaster is the most dangerous boss of this game by a long shot, and it doesn't help that he gets 2 chances to beat me, something he makes the most of. These no dying, no healing runs deserve a high placement, as they allow me to make mistakes, but the bare minimum if I want to stay alive. All reasons why this one matches the Miles challenge with a 10. Tomb Raider 2013 No Dying is a challenge most probably don't care about, but I really do. I'm a real big fan of this particular series, and pushing myself to not die feels very fitting with the theme of the games. It's quite easy to die, especially with those climbing sections and being overwhelmed by numerous armored enemies, but it's all part of the fun. It helps that it's not a very long game. Definitely a 7. Uncharted 2 without guns is not one of those challenges that is very doable, but the parts that are doable are a blast. Uncharted is such a fun series, and I think most challenges can keep the fun of the game. Removing guns means every time I'm out of cover, rushing to knock enemy gunmen out, the excitement is always high to see if I can make progress in the fight before I'm brought low. Luck is still a big factor, of course, and there's far too many moments you need guns, but it is quite fun, so it deserves a 7 as well. 100%ing Marvel Spider-Man 2 without taking damage based on checkpoints proved way harder than I had imagined. It was originally meant to be a no-death challenge, but the bosses proved more than I could manage with my 0 prior experience, and I really wanted to experience the rest of the game ASAP. So I altered it to something that wouldn't cause a full game reset if failed. I always meant to go back for no death, and I had so many ideas for other challenges in the game, but Spider-Man 2 never hooked me like 1 or the Miles game did. I find that its story is far weaker for 1, along with not the most exciting side missions, and I was finding it's really not much fun to replay. But it does have way harder and better bosses. Combine that with the new parry mechanic, and I had my work cut out for me. Though I did find a loophole by jumping instead of parrying. Even if it doesn't match its predecessors in many areas, the combat is super solid, and this challenge pushes me to test that combat to its limits, earning this one the 3rd 7 in a row. Red Dead Redemption without guns was honestly an awful experience. It's a gunslinger game. Please, for the love of yourself, use a gun. With the minimum gun usage possible, it's just not a good time until way later when you unlock throwing knives and explosives. Even then, it is still more terrible than tough. The combat is unsatisfying, heavily based on luck, and there's one very memorably awful river ride with the most fragile man in the West. That river ride alone is why this challenge is one of the very rare placements of 1. Jedi Survivor No Dodging brought the pain as so many attacks required dodging if I'd like to stay handsome. There were enemies like the security droids that punished me pretty severely for not dodging. It is quite a bit more difficult of a playthrough, but it's not too much. It pushed me to maximize how much I understood each enemy's reach and encouraged me to learn how to use the point-blank shot to counter unblockable attacks. A good breath of fresh air after my Red Dead challenge, making it an 8 on the scale. Returning to Ghost with stealth and ghost weapons only allowed, I should have known better in terms of how easy it would be. Stealth is so overpowered in this game, which very much fits with its themes, so I wasn't in a terrible amount of danger usually. Still, any playthrough is a fun playthrough, and this is just another way to have a good time with one of the many ways you can beat the game. I'm gonna go with 6. It wasn't long since my Uncharted 2 challenge before I went for my Uncharted 3 one. I did something different for 1 than I did for 2, and now I wanted to do something different for 3, which is why I removed the cover part of this cover shooter, along with no rolling. With how easily Nate can be gunned down, it's no surprise that this challenge forced me to make every shot land if I wanted to survive. It kept things from ever getting bogged down and made sure every moment was fast-paced and exciting. High fatality rates, but that's a price worth paying. 8 for sure. For my 50th challenge, I showed I learned nothing from my Red Dead 1 challenge by doing the same no guns challenge for Red Dead 2. Just no. Please, no. Arthur may have a decent amount of weapons on his side, but with how much luck is needed to ensure he's not gunned down first, or much more likely, his gang isn't killed at all, this challenge was nearly all about luck, something I clearly don't have and do not like relying almost solely on. It demands a score of 1. I had to make a whole other counter just for how much my allies would get killed. It is almost the worst challenge I've done. Beating the 2004 Star Wars Battlefront in all the ways you shouldn't, where I spun a wheel and took the modifier for each battle, was an atrocious idea. The variety part, where each level would be different from the last with the wheel spinning, is a very cool idea and one I should do again. The game I chose for it with the modifiers picked? Not so much. Many of them didn't work out at all, and with how incredibly horrendous my allies are in this game, I was often on my own to figure out a victory. Once again, luck was everything, and I have to give this one a second 1 in a row. This was not my favorite time to be a challenge gamer. 2005's Star Wars Battlefront 2, now with only pistols. It is not a speedy way to overcome your enemies, but there is a certain enjoyment at outplaying everyone with such an awful weapon. It's not as silly as explosives only, but Hoth is not quite as bad with an elite pistol in hand. This evens it out as it also only gets a 5. Dark Souls no healing is definitely easier than the previous Souls-like, but that only means so much with my skill level. The no healing made it so I died far more often, but by the end I was rocking a fantastic shield and mayhaps too strong of a blade, but it was never enough that I still didn't have plenty of trouble. Dark Souls 1 is not my favorite of the games. Sorry, don't murder me for saying so, which means no healing only makes it a bit more interesting, earning it a 5 as well. To those who like the game more, you're sure to find more joy out of this challenge. My Leap Day challenge of leaping only attacks in Tsushima was a last minute idea I had to implement before I had to wait 4 years for the timing to align again. With how much the archers and the shielded units don't like to let me attack, this one proves a bit troublesome. The silly nature of the challenge always keeps things lighthearted no matter how bad things go, and for that, I have to give this one a 7. My time on the island wasn't done yet, as I immediately returned to beat it with as many restrictions as I could, taking away my allowance for damage, armor, charms, special attacks, and any weapon but the sword. A challenge that focuses on the core mechanics of combat and forces me to perfect my skills if I want to advance is one of my favorite ways to play, especially since luck is nearly a non-factor in these games. The only real drawback is fire. What value has fire ever really done mankind anyway? But still, this one's a strong contender for 8. Dark Souls 2 without healing, death-wise, is about even with Dark Souls 1, if I ignore the DLC part. The DLC for Dark Souls 2 might as well be a whole separate game, as it doubled my deaths and makes it difficult for me to rank this challenge. The main game is hard, especially with my health being reduced every time I lose, which is all the time, but on the other hand, killing the same enemies enough times keeps them from spawning again, and I look so stylish all game. On the other hand, the DLC drove me so insane by the end that I actually removed my normal unspoken rule of not usually using the strongest build or approach to win, just so I could pull through this one. I limit myself at times, to a degree, to maintain the essence of any challenge, because it doesn't matter if I can't heal, if I can just instant murder everyone, but I was going extra bonkers with those DLC bosses. Still, I really do like Dark Souls 2, and I'd happily give it a 7 as it proves so memorable. Mainly as it left scars on my psyche. The DLC was so brutal with this challenge though, I'm gonna have to lower it to a 6. Another dose of nostalgia in the form of 2002's Spider-Man movie game. It was a very simple challenge idea. Maximum difficulty, no punching. Effectively taking out 2/3 of Spidey's combos. I see why little kid me played on the easy difficulties. Otherwise, the difficulty may have driven me to quit gaming and do something else with my time. Would you guys still watch if I was doing challenge knitting? What about challenge reading? I'm a big fan of reading. Come on guys, let me just read to you. It'll be fun. But for now, since we're stuck with challenge gaming, let's focus on this and say that this game is merciless. Too many levels don't even require a challenge beyond being on the hardest difficulty. It's more a relief than properly satisfying when I beat any level, so as much as I have nostalgia for this game and appreciate all the shenanigans, I'm gonna have to give this one a 4. I have very mixed feelings about my return to Red Dead 1, when I strive to master my marksman skills and win without missing or using the powerful Deadeye power. On one hand, it is incredibly satisfying whenever I win with ace shooting, and actually being able to use the core mechanic of the game this time is great. On the other hand, lacking a proper checkpoint reset button, having the stat counter count inanimate objects they make me shoot as misses, and struggling so long to make the minigun section accurate as possible really hurts the fun of the challenge. Plus, I'm the worst shot imaginable when on horseback, which is expectantly common. All that made for a very sad rat, and why this challenge takes a 3. Better than the last two, I guess. As usual, certain challenges are way more fun or way worse depending on how skilled you are, so keep that in mind for how much you may end up liking any. Sooner or later, I'm going to do a fun challenge for these games, I swear it. Maybe a one life challenge for the 2 games, or a chaos mod playthrough. Star Wars Battlefront 2 2017 without abilities was the first I did for the newer version of the game, and I really had a blast with it. Minus the space missions, those were so boring, but thankfully uncommon. The shooting is solid, the campaign is short, though I wish it was longer, and the bugs are many, but thankfully they only add to the experience. I'm haunted by them. I'll give this one an 8. Star Wars Bounty Hunter with only blaster pistols, 1 life per level, and no jetpack in combat is another one I find more difficult to rank. When I introduced a friend to the game and watched them play shortly after this challenge, I realized that maybe the gameplay loop really doesn't hold up. It's mostly just holding the fire button and letting the game kill everyone for you with auto-aim, even when played normally. I want to like the game more than it actually deserves because it's such a cool concept, and Django is so great at aura farming. But that being said, I feel like this challenge made the game far better, as I had to be very careful at fighting so I wouldn't get reset. Since the challenge, specifically the 1 life per level part of it, is a good way to improve the game, even if it's not the greatest time, I'm gonna give this one a 4 at minimum. It's perfect for a 7-year-old me, it's just not current me. Jedi Survivor No Lightsaber. 10 out of 10! Really one of the most satisfying wins I ever had, and a massive test of my patience. It all felt right no matter how tough it got. The good kind of patience testing and making me outthink every battle is all a win. Returning to Battlefront 2 2017 for the reverse challenge of only abilities, I once again have a pretty good time. It is the opposite playstyle and I hate space fights even more, but it's still a fun time with plenty of variation and abilities to be used. It should score equally with its match and be at 8 as well. Returning back to Jedi Survivor so soon after No Lightsaber, I built off of that for a blaster-only run. It might reduce my abilities even more, but getting to start off right away with the blaster and having all the experience I gained in No Lightsaber actually makes this the much easier challenge of the two. It's not as rewarding as No Lightsaber, but it's still plenty fun and much more fast-paced, earning it a 9. Another Crab's Treasure is an easy Souls-like compared to other Souls games, but it's so well made, hilarious, and full of heart that none of that matters. Especially if you actually find other Souls games to be too hard, this one could be perfect for you. I enjoyed every second of this game, and the no healing I feel was a great choice so that it could still offer some challenge. 8 out of 10. Returning to Ghost again, this time I upped the challenge even more by only allowing counterattacks like my Survivor Defense Mastery challenge. Perfect parries and perfect dodges were my only means to fight back, unless you're an archer, which meant I really needed to learn the timing of every enemy. Refusing to don the best armor for the job, healing, or using charms all ensured I kept it extremely difficult. This one demolished me and I loved every single second of it. I love challenges so much because I am obsessed with growth and improvement, which this challenge, more than most, made me feel I had accomplished. Most challenges prioritize completion of the task, which is beating any fight or the game itself, over practicing to improve, but this one blended the two quite well. Defense Mastery challenges might be my favorite kind of challenges, and I must reward this one a 10. 100%ing Jedi Survivor without taking damage based on checkpoints was finally me taking the time to right a wrong. Nearly a year earlier, I had first played Survivor in a no damage checkpoint challenge that went pretty poorly. As growth is my goal, and I wasn't learning anything that first challenge, I had chosen to quit so I could come back after much more practice and hopefully do way better. What story-wise, I absolutely did. Including the rest of the game? Not so much. Curse that massive beast triple threat. Still, Cal has so much going for him that the odds were usually in my favor. 8 out of 10. Force Unleashed this time without the Force and no upgrades makes me fully rely on my saber. I severely underestimated how terrible the lightsaber is in this game. I should have known from the second game, but I was a fool, and it feels so much worse here. Without all the health packs of the PlayStation version, I'd never have gotten anywhere. I highly recommend not doing this challenge because it's just tedious and only grows worse as the game goes. No Lightsaber in Survivor felt satisfying and rewarding through patience. This one just feels dull even while fully relying on the worst saber known to the galaxy. Cool game, of course. You absolutely should unleash the Force is all. A very lowly one. In fact, Red Dead 2 had more bright spots with that beautiful throwing axe, so that makes this one the least fun challenge I've done. X-Men Legends, without losing my whole team, was really an excuse to play X-Men Legends, as I never had. Another oldie, this one is a goldie, from the art holding up, the characters being fun to improve, and the combat being challenging, but fair, with a wide cast of X-Men characters. Every time I lost a teammate, even if it was Iceman a billion times over, I deeply cared and worried. something I normally wouldn't care much if the challenge wasn't going. Repeated tries as I lost made me learn the builds and the mechanics of each character more, choosing the right one for each mission, and I really enjoyed it. A truly good challenge should boost understanding of the game and make every fight more worthwhile, which this one definitely does. That nets it an 8. Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase without pies is such a silly challenge and my shortest one. Definitely not my easiest one though, funny enough. Platforming is not my strength, as anyone who watches my videos can tell. I did this one simply because I played this when I was small and I never forgot it, always wanting to go back to finish what I had started. For only a 2-hour adventure, there's no major downsides or positives other than my love for the Scooby Gang, which I have plenty of. Scooby can have a 6. Deadpool without upgrades is one of those that you can't be surprised involves a lot of very slow killings as I do minimum damage. But unlike other challenges with tedious fights that take a while, having to stay constantly on guard of retaliation and teleporting all around means it's not so bad. Not so good either, but hey, could be worse. That sounds like a perfect example of a 5. The only thing easier than beating Ghosts with a focus on stealth is beating it with a focus on bows. They're just so powerful and trivialize most encounters, so it's less of a challenge skill-wise and more of a challenge restriction-wise. And it's certainly a fun time as every shot that lands surges me with satisfaction. Just a really fun way to play, so I'd give it a 7. Number 72 and number 73 of our challenges hold a special place in the first 99 challenges by being part of the same video, as they are set in the same game of 2004's Spider-Man 2. The first involved not using web attacks, which ensured the combat was harder as those webs made it way too easy, but the checkpoints made sure the consequences were never too great. I'd start off better, but end up worse with the second challenge of no upgrades, as clearly any no upgrades challenge gets much harder as the game progresses. Spider-Man 2 isn't nearly as brutal as the first game, while having great web slinging and alright combat. Both challenges are a decent way to play the game if you don't want to breeze through it too easily. I'd say both get a 5. God of War ranged attacks only was... wait, all these recent challenges were over a year ago? My god, time is flying! Absolutely none of these challenges since Jedi Survivor No Damage feel like they're over a year old, and yet they are! Honestly, that's awful. I really meant to be back in God of War again long before this much time had passed. Well, eons ago when I did this challenge apparently, I found actually getting to use my weapon a big win. The combat is not nearly as fast-paced as when I'm punching everyone to death, but it allowed me to keep my distance and learn the fights in a way that I found much more relaxing, and I actually did do more damage. It's not super relaxing, but more. A slow and steady pace that's not pure panic. You know, I should do this challenge for the 2018 version as well. 8 out of 10. Back in Republic Commando, this time I wanted to prevent not only me from healing, but my whole squad. That way, instead of just me being a burden to the team, we can all be burdens equally. It could be aggravating at points, like once again with those frickin' Geonosian beam troopers, yet it also was fun staying on the verge of defeat at all times. It made it so I had to rely heavily on my team, but they also had to rely on me, as all of us really needed each other to survive. We felt more like commandos deep behind enemy territory left to fend for ourselves, and I think that works really well with this game, matching this one to the last Commando one at 7. Fallout 4 was actually meant to be a no healing challenge, but after 16 hours and barely any progress, I decided it was a challenge meant for people with a greater love for the game, not I. So, I decided to not give up on the game, but try something different than usual. Doing it as Darth Maul was my first modded challenge, but it didn't come out quite as I planned. The mods were certainly cool, very well done to their creators, but I was basically doing a very powerful bat-only challenge as I had only so many ways to replicate Maul's abilities that I know of. Still, a chance to do a little story combined into a challenge is always something I enjoy, so I'll give this one a 5. Jedi Survivor with troll moves only was a very funny request that I had to try out. It was a very loosey-goosey rule, as what counts as trolling is up for debate, but that looseness allowed for maximum shenanigans and experimentation, which is always a win. 7 for pure sillies. Oh my gods! Even this one is over a year old! If asked before this, I would have guessed merely 6 or 7 months old. Yuck! X-Men Legends 2 is another that I hadn't played before, but I really enjoyed the follow-up to the first Legends. It doesn't have as strong of a story, and it's a bit too many enemies in every battle, but it's a nice deal more playable characters. This challenge is harder than the last, as I can't gain back any teammate that falls, making for a pretty fun, harrowing time. Emphasis on harrowing, when I have teammates killing themselves just to mess with me. The game is weaker than its prequel, but the challenge is modified to be better than the first game, earning this one an 8 as well. Emphasizing my dodge and aggression skills in my no blocking challenge for Ghost, as usual I shed my blood all over the island, but it allows me to get way better at dodging and realize time is relative. As in, much like working out and holding a plank, the amount of panic and suffering found in just a few minutes of fighting gone wrong can make that time feel triple as long. 7 out of 10. Baldur's Gate 3 with only wild magic sorcerers isn't my normal type of challenge, as it's obvious you can beat the game with that set team. But still, as I am restricted only to wild magic sorcerers, it does count as a challenge, with the primary goal being chaos and silliness for my first venture into Baldur's Gate 3. As it took over 100 hours, it would certainly seem like I got my fill of wild magic, but actually, I was rather disappointed by how little wild magic insanity ensued. That is why I went back in later and beat it with mods that upped the wild magic by a massive amount. That is why this challenge version takes a grade of 5 for not nearly enough wild magic. In order to beat Jedi Fallen Order with only kicks, I decided to practice by first doing a challenge where I'd have to learn all the moves to win, as I have far more experience in Survivor than Fallen Order. That gave birth to the Defense Mastery Challenge, like my long ago Survivor Challenge. Just like that one, it's quite a great time, though with way less defeats. That's because Fallen Order's enemies often don't have a proper block to break, and, well, everything in Fallen Order is normally much more chill, fitting to a Padawan's journey to recovery. Like I've covered, this challenge type is always my favorite, earning this one a 10, as it also really boosted how well I know the game, just like I had hoped. It had been 47 challenges since my last LEGO challenge, which I find wild as time has flown by, and now I was returning to LEGO in the Lord of the Rings No Dying challenge. I finally brought in some actual strategy this time by not resetting the moment I died and pressing on so I could learn the whole game to a much better degree before resetting to do it all properly. It's good to see I can sometimes show basic sense. Despite gaining a new phobia of raging trolls, this is a fun adventure with lots of danger, making it all the more worthwhile when I conquer it. Gotta go 7. The Jedi 5 Stance Challenge is best explained just by watching it. Not just because I want you to watch it, though of course I do. It just makes a lot more sense that way without spoiling anything. I'll be very honest, this is my absolute favorite video I've made by a large margin, and one of my favorite challenges. Oh, I hated parts of it for sure, mainly the end hanger fights every playthrough, but crafting a greater story using the challenge and testing myself against my previous self every run made for the most memorable experience. An obvious 10. It takes way longer to make this kind of video and challenge happen, but I hope to do more of this type in the future when the right idea comes to me and I have the time. Arkham City without upgrades, quickfire gadgets, or taking damage based on checkpoints came about because I got tired of losing my pure no damage run on silly blunders, and I wanted a different challenge that would hopefully refine my skills. This challenge definitely succeeded in that, and while the fighting can get very slow without critical strikes and quick takedowns to speed it up, that put a strong focus on practice over everything, which is exactly what I wanted from it, so that nets it a 9. Jedi Fallen Order with only kicks was actually supposed to come after my 1 life challenge, but just like my Arkham City no damage run being so postponed by those easy to avoid blunders, same goes for my 1 life Jedi challenge. You'll see. But as it turns out, Fallen Order kicks only wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong, it is still awful at parts, like battling on Kashyyyk, and I very nearly quit. Heck, I did quit, but thankfully came back, and once I had learned to accept it as a true test of patience, it went so so much better. None of the fights that I thought would be more of a problem actually really bothered me, and there's no better way to grow acquainted with everything an enemy can do than being stuck with them far longer than saber usage would normally allow. It is a very rewarding win, and that's why despite the horrendous portions, this one snags a 9. LEGO Lord of the Rings got me interested in beating LEGO Hobbit with the same challenge. I can't say much about it because really, it's very similar, just easier. That nets it a 6. Most concise I've ever been. Ultimate Spidey's No Dodge Challenge was just an excuse to combine my experience of the game with my love for the comic of the same name, which makes for a video filled with comparisons of the two with a special focus on my hatred of Norman Osborn. Mainly because he ruins both the challenge and my joy when he shows up to kill me. Everything else about the game and the challenge works plenty well, but that one boss fight nearly soured it all. So I think a 6 is a pretty fair ranking for it. Restricting myself to only piercing attacks and Ghost is actually a great way to better my defensive skills. This is not only because Perfect Dodge Strike is one of the very few ways I can attack, but also because of the timing of my attacks have to be much more precise to avoid getting interrupted and slain. Another win for skill improvement means this one is an 8. Tales of Iron without armor is a very different game from most others I've played, and it pushed me to the limits of my suffering. The speed and timing I had to maintain to avoid dying feels insane throughout so much of the game. Without armor to endure some of that pain, my deaths rise to numbers I hadn't seen in quite a while. I don't really feel I ever got better. I just tippy-toed my way to victory, which is what I call any time where my skill level didn't truly permanently grow. I just was able to do much better for one brief fight before my skill lowered back down to its true level. That's not a great feeling. I'd mark this one as a 3 with my skill level. Jedi Survivor kicking only could count for 2 challenges, I suppose, with my 2 back-to-back runs. But I don't count it as 2 because the second only existed for me to fight a certain boss again to try and beat him right, and so I could suffer from quick-time events. I'm gonna stick to counting it as 1 challenge split in 2, like my 5 stance challenge. Both runs had some seriously insane troubles, like a certain floating droid that took me hours to luck into getting into the right position, and some pretty agonizing firefights. But the time in between those roadblocks was much simpler, allowing me breathers and moments where I could feel the progress rushing by. I did have to do a whole nother counter for all the accidental, non-kick resets though, which proved pretty annoying, lowering this challenge down to a 5. Fantastic Four the movie game with no cosmic power. This means I couldn't use the majority of my great abilities, which included taking the titular invisibility from Invisible Woman. I had pretty fond memories of playing this as a kid, and needing my older brother's help to get past some of the button mashing sequences. It's funny to see how easy they actually are. If played normally, it would be easy to mindlessly button mash to victory the whole game, but by taking away cosmic power, I'm deeply underpowered and have to use my block, best combo timings, and think a bit more to win. That's an overall improvement. A fantastic 7. Following nostalgia up with nostalgia, I beat Star Wars Jedi Academy without healing. The lightsaber combat is really tricky in this one, but quite rewarding, and well made even all these decades later. When you don't know what you're doing, like I don't, that can be rather aggravating as the game doesn't go out of its way to teach you, and the lack of healing can double that aggravation. But only having so much health to rely on means I must learn to tackle each fight with greater caution, thought, and hopefully better skill. When my footage got lost for this one and I had to do it twice, it felt great to see how much better I did the second time around, something I partially attribute to the lack of healing forcing me to learn. Still, too many fights felt like a fight of luck and hope, meaning this one can't do better than a 7. It would have been a 6 if I hadn't gone in a second time for a much better playthrough. Back in Ghost, but this time nearly defenseless, without blocking or dodging available, I really had to plan out my builds and understand the enemy parrying me in a way I never had to before. Much of the success came down to whether I'd be patient enough for the enemy's guard to drop. With a focus on back-to-back takedowns the rest of the time, I had a pretty good time with this challenge. That lands it with the 8s. Jedi Survivor's Purity Single Blade Challenge was sadly my least favorite Jedi challenge, despite how long I was looking forward to it. I found Purity to be far too overpowered in a way that removes any thinking for combat and doesn't work well with a game that's about timing and understanding the enemy's moves. Who needs understanding when a single cut or two will end most enemies? If it worked more like lethal difficulty from Ghost, with a greater give and take, more worry of punishment for mistakes, with more focus on melee fighting than ranged, and greater enemy numbers to apply pressure on mistakes, then I'd be more for it. As is, dying like nothing or killing like nothing with no real variation or combat flow all game isn't particularly stimulating for me. Still, I do know Purity is very popular for working like a real lightsaber would, and it adds a variety that's cool to have if you'd like to try something different. For that, I appreciate it, but for me personally, I'd give this challenge a 4. I suspect most others would rank it much higher though, so you may as well. Ghost of Tsushima's normal guide challenge was quite the recommendation, taking away nearly anything that could give me an advantage. Here's one that I both thoroughly hated and loved throughout. On one hand, I was gravely disappointed how terrible I did, and I thought all my experience would do me better. But this one has the highest loss count of any challenge at this time. Those Iki brutes proved exceptionally difficult and made me question my actions. But it also forced me to really learn how to beat them in melee combat. I'd normally headshot or stealth kill them, learning nothing. This is a challenge that really takes patience when you stumble through it as much as I did. Plus, the fact that I did basically no damage made every fight slower and more painful as it went on, but with how fluid and well-paced the combat in this game still is, it mostly felt rewarding in like fantastic practice. Mostly. 10 out of 10. Hollow Knight without charms and without healing was simply put, fun. The game was nowhere near as hard as I thought it would be, so I'm very glad I did this challenge to even it out and make more fights a threat that they wouldn't have been. That's worth an 8. Ghost of Yote with only the sword proved much harder than Tsushima's attempt, but that's partially from doing a full 100% run and sword only being the equivalent to stone stance only in the predecessor. It's a simple but fun way to play and test your sword skills. The only real downside is 100%ing the game this way might make you wish for the other weapons for variety's sake over the greater length. 7 sounds fair to me. Jedi Survivor with only the Force takes the no lightsaber idea and amplifies it like Blaster only did. But the Blaster is quite powerful, where the Force isn't nearly as powerful in this game. Unless your enemy is next to a ledge, which is surprisingly common, but worthless in the boss fights. Being so similar to my no lightsaber challenge, it was a good way to compare how far I've come since then, especially with boss fights. I definitely had to tap into my inner Jedi for the patience to whittle away the bosses, but thanks to all the safety violations, regular enemies flew on by. That struck a good balance of pacing and difficulty. 9 out of 10. Star Wars Outlaws without blasters, I honestly did not expect to like as much as I did. It helps a lot that I like Star Wars as much as I do, and the challenge made it more interesting as I had to build carefully around my lack of blasters. That made my progress in the game feel much more rewarding. That earns Challenge 99 a 7 for properly turning an okay game into a better than okay game. That's all the challenges I've released so far. 11 top tier 10s, 6 near peak 9s, 19 great 8s, 23 very fun 7s, 11 mostly positive 6s, 12 alright 5s, 6 meh 4s, 4 lowly 3s, 3 blah 2s, and 4 awful 1s. Arkham One Life takes the place as my favorite challenge I've done at this point, while Force Unleashed No Lightsaber takes dead last. So many ups and downs, just like in life. We gotta keep pushing onwards and strive ever upwards, no matter the challenge. I'm thankful to you all for coming along on this journey with me and making the journey all the better. Really do appreciate it. There's so much more adventures and shenanigans ahead for us all. I never run low on ideas, just time, but that's another challenge to overcome. Now I'm off to plot in my lair for all the shenanigans to come and to practice my evil laugh. Heh heh heh. See, I need the practice. Have an awesome time, friends, and know you got me rooting for you in whatever challenges you face. See you later.